for me, so I took over the worship department in 2015. I came from North Carolina, where I was a worship pastor there. That was, yeah, North Carolina. That was fun because I was a worship pastor for my brother-in-law, so that's like extra easy, right? Extra fun. But I can remember in the early days of pastoring here thinking, trying to always avoid the hard stuff, like trying to avoid the conversations and the hard conversations and the difficult situations. And I think a lot of times I'll get questions on pastoring, and I find that most of the time, and I was in the same boat and still am sometimes, people are trying to figure out if there's a magic nugget or tool that will help them avoid a hard conversation. Anyone? They're like, how can I do this without actually having to have a hard conversation? And I just kind of finally realized, not that every conversation has to be hard, but the bottom line is when you're a pastor, you're going to have conversations you don't want to have. And you're going to have confrontation, and you're going to have all those things. But I think just to start, the bottom line for a lot of this pastoring stuff is you just have to do what you don't want to do a lot of the times. Anyone not like confrontation? Yeah, I get it. And again, not that everything has to be a confrontation, but really I found most of pastoring is just having a conversation. A lot of times it's so easy to grumble and complain about people or situations, and then someone will ask me, well, have you talked to them? And I'm like, actually, I haven't. And that's pretty much what you have to do. But we'll go through just some topics, stuff like that. You want to add anything so far, bro?
No, that's all. Yeah, I do, actually. That's an amazing point. I think, being a leader, one of the biggest lessons for me is to learn how to weather the storm of an initial reaction. Because if you took a minute and close your eyes and think back through the things that actually catapulted you further in your life, it's people that were actually willing to confront you. Or maybe told you something you didn't want to hear. And those are the things that actually probably shaped you and changed you the most. And when you can do that, what tends to happen is you take an atmosphere into every situation. And when you have a mindset that really can see past that, it's like it's an unspoken atmosphere, environment that you bring. Even your words carry something different when you actually really believe. And you're not so concerned about, are they going to like me? Are they going to be upset? You're still sensitive and you care, but there's a confidence that you bring into the conversation when you bring security and identity yourself as a leader into those hard conversations. So
that's so good. There's been so many instances where I'm like mad about a situation or mad at a person, and I'll talk to Eric, and he's just so calm, and I'm like, man, you're not mad at all, are you? I guess I should get over this and talk like a normal person. But honestly, it's so easy to get worked up about conversations, and it's been amazing watching Eric. It's like, no, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. And that's so key, I think, not going into it thinking you're going to have a fight. I think that's a big part of what I learned early on about pastoring is assumptions and how bad that is, and how assumptions can lead to a lot more chaos than is needed, a lot more drama than is needed. And so something Matt Stinton actually did my job before me, and he would always ask so many questions, even if he thought he knew what was going on. Hey, what did I miss in this situation? How are you doing? Those kind of things. And it's amazing what not making assumptions can do for a conversation. If you go into the conversation giving people the benefit of the doubt, the conversation can go a lot better. And I've found that time and time again when Eric reminds me not to have assumptions. Where are we going? I think one thing that has helped me through conversations and just pastoring in general is checking my heart before conversations of where is my heart in this and where is my heart towards this person. And I think so often it can be easy in pastoring and in ministry to only care for people in the context of what they can do or what they can bring to your team, instead of just caring for that person because you care for that person. And I think when I'm going into because a lot of these conversations we're having as a pastor, you're having to deliver bad news or something like that. And I think what covers me is, where's my heart towards this person? Am I covered in that I love this person and I want what's best for their life? And I think a lot of times we can kind of minimize people's worlds into what they're doing in our world and kind of forget that they have a whole life outside of their involvement with us in ministry, and forget that, hey, I don't hold all the power over this person's world in a good and a bad way. So the pressure's kind of off me of, man, if I deliver bad news or if I demote them or something, man, I'm crushing their world. And instead having a bigger view of people and also holding them with an open hand. It's so easy. I mean, I come from a smaller church where we had the same team every week, and it's very easy to hold them tightly and think, I got to do everything I can to keep them, and I never want them to take any other opportunities. And it's been amazing here watching Brian and Jen, how empowering they are and how they hold people with an open hand, and they legitimately want what's best for that person's life long term, outside of what they do in the ministry world.
Yeah, that's awesome. How many of you actually are directly overseeing and pastoring people? Everyone in the room? Maybe who isn't? Okay. But so the people who are not, you're just sort of in this because you want to lead, you want to pastor, you feel called. Is that okay? I would say the next thing that's coming to my mind is the need to have relational equity established with the people you're leading. You can't have amazing revelation, concepts, standards, core values, and not have connection or relational equity. You can, it just won't work nearly as well. And when you begin to build relational equity, even when you begin to have the hard conversations, what it does is it minimizes the chatter and the gossiping, the negative talk that can kill your teams in your ministry, because you build that trust and relational equity. So a lot of times the hardest point is when you're beginning. So if any of you are new into an environment, I would say I'd make that your highest priority is to build connection. Yesterday, my son Peyton, he's part of the Bright Ones that performed. He was up here talking, and I was kind of getting rocked at his answer because how many of you have kids? You know, you're pastoring your kids, right? And you can teach them, you can be right, you can have a whole list of things that they should do, and you can go and have big, conversations where you're preaching at them. And maybe there's benefit down the road because they're learning stuff. But the times I started having the most impact on my son was when I would go into his room and I would sit there and he just knew I wasn't going to leave. That's it. And then all of a sudden he begins to open up and he begins to talk and begins to connect. And then I have a pathway because now he's open to me, to hear me. And then and then it causes a hunger for him to ask for my input and my advice. So, I think, he made a comment yesterday about the thing that inspires me more than any teaching or whatever is to actually just see the demonstration of passion, love, connection, all those things. So, build relational equity with the people that you're leading. I'm not saying be best friends with them, but that's huge.
Yeah. Talk about, I've heard you talk a lot about staying current on stuff. I think a lot of times it's easy to let stuff fester, let time go by, and then it's bigger than it needs to be.
Yeah. Again, I think that goes back to kind of we fear the confrontation sometimes. We fear the initial reaction that we think will happen, and so we become passive. And we've tried to make it a point. We've failed miserably at this, to be honest. Let me also say this real quick. The reality of something is way more beautiful than the perception of something. Like you guys might see Bethel Music Instagram, you might see our worship community nights with the fire pits, and your perception might be this amazing thing. The reality is we're not perfect. The reality is we keep bumping our heads against the wall. The reality is that we have conflict. But even that is way more beautiful than any perception that you might think you have. And so when you begin to have that mindset with your teams, then it kind of helps you not try to manage a perception that you want to have. It's like, no, I'm embracing the reality. I'm angry at this situation. I need to talk to this person. And when you stay more in real time, I don't think it's rocket but you guys know in your own lives, the more you let something fester. But But in our world, it's super important because there's so many moving parts. We're a big ship, and you can think that you've communicated something, but if you don't stay in real time connection with the things that you're feeling, you're thinking, then it just consumes the broader team. So
And I think a lot of times in our world, a lot of, and probably in your world too, a lot of conflict can arise just from miscommunication or no communication. And so even like a practical thing we've done that's really saved us from a lot of frustration is just making sure that we're communicating the best we can. And just like a real example, our calendar world is crazy. I'm sure most of you that work for a church, there's always events. There's always people always have lives outside of it, vacations, all those things. So we meet at least once a month with the calendar people from all the worlds in our world. So like Bethel music, itinerant trips, tours, local church. Because to be on our team or to be on Bethel music, part of it is playing 2 Sundays a month, being involved in the church. Like that's a prerequisite because the mission of Bethel Music is to export what's going on here, is to export the worship. And how can you do that unless you're here and involved? And so, that's easier said than done, and it sounds great, but that really means, oh, well, so-and-so's got a vacation, and we also have a tour, and that means they're gone 3 Sundays, and what does that mean? So we just meet once a month and make sure we're all talking. And that has not always been the case. And then I'm frustrated, or Eric's frustrated, or Jen's frustrated. And so trying to do as many things as we can to get ahead of the game to where we're on the same page saves a lot. I think with that, too, is just setting clear expectations. I can remember when I took over in 2015, and I was texting people about not meeting an expectation. And they would say, oh, I didn't know that was an expectation. And I'm like, oh, my gosh, this is going to be fun. And so we had this big meeting with our whole world and said, hey, here are our clear expectations. Here's what we expect from you. Here's what you can expect from us. And it was actually like written down. So we have a handbook in the worship department. There's a handbook with Bethel Music. Obviously, that doesn't encompass everything, but it's a clear expectation of, hey, we expect you to be at church when you're in town. Hey, we expect you to come to our team night once a month. We expect you to play twice a month. Just things like that. What are the things in your world that you assume they know? Again, it's assumptions. It's so easy to assume that they know, and a lot of times they just don't know. They're not trying to break the rules. They just don't know. So where in your world can you set up clear expectations? Because it really helps to get ahead of frustrations. And then once you have those expectations set up clearly, it's a lot easier to enforce something that everyone knows.